Welcome to another episode of Fear the Talking Heads, where I have a brand new co-host with me tonight. Hello, N and M podcast, Josh Harold. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Big fan. Love your show. Very excited to talk.
Now, talk a little bit about your podcast since we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street in this episode.
Yeah, so as you can probably figure out by my logo, huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan. Podcast actually started as kind of an homage to Nightmare on Elm Street and interviewing cast members or crew members from there. We've kind of gone, a little expanded beyond that, but the core will always be Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's a very special subject to me.
Let's talk about the sympathetic deaths that were in the franchise from 1 through 9. And yes, we are including Freddy versus Jason. We are including the 2010 remake because it's all in that universe. And I feel like it all has its part in that big puzzle. If you're watching this or listening to this and you want to drop us a comment and let us know, I'm very curious to see other perspectives out there too, where it lands. So with the first one, the OG of Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm gonna say three, two, one, and Josh is gonna hold up his sign with his name, and I'm just gonna say who mine is. You ready, Josh?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Three, two, one, Glenn.
I'm curious to hear your reasoning, and then I'll tell you mine.
So with Glenn, I know some people are probably gonna say, oh, it's because it's Johnny Depp. Although his death in this franchise was epic. No one could have seen this geyser of blood coming from a waterbed. I did not, would never have expected that, my little kid brain. He falls asleep, and
Mhm.
Nancy is across the street, like utterly freaking out because her mom has put bars up on the windows and everything so her daughter can't just sneak out when she wants to. And she knows that Glenn is passed out. His parents won't let him come to the phone or anything. And so she's screaming like, Glenn. And I'll never forget that because it was just like you could see the pain because she knows that her boyfriend's going to get killed. My backup was Tina because it starts off in the movie, you're thinking Tina is going to be the main star of the show. And she's getting hunted down in her dreams by Freddy. He's kind of taunting her every time we see a clip. And her death was another one that I don't think we had seen anything like that before in horror.
Yeah, so I will say my backup was Tina. And it was really just as you said, you open on her, everything's surrounding her. There's a supporting cast, but she's the star, obviously. If you go in and you know nothing about it, it sets everything up to be she's the star. And her death was just so shocking, just the way that they did it. And I loved watching the making of and how they did the rotating room and all the fun stuff. And yeah, she was definitely my backup. And shout out to Amanda. She is gorgeous 41 years later. Unbelievable. For mine, though, I picked Rod, and I'll tell you why when we open the film, the group of friends are talking about nightmares and not being able to sleep and things like that. But here comes Rod coming in, making a joke, playing it off, tough guy, cool guy, all the fun stuff. And then, when they're having their sleepover, we realize as Tina is kind of talking about her dreams, Nancy and Glenn finally are like, wait a minute, I'm having that exact same dream. But then you have Rod come in when they're outside, kind of investigating a noise, and they hear the screeching, and he's got this little rake that he's making the sound with. So it kind of like hints at, okay, is he having the same dream? Because that's a very similar sound to what's happening in these dreams. And so, right before they go to bed, Rod and Tina are laying there, and he says to her, "No more fights." She says, "No more fights," and he said, "Good. Now maybe no more nightmares for both of us." And this is the first time he's kind of admitted that he's having nightmares too. And during Tina's death scene, you can't help but feel for the guy. It's happening in front of him, but now that we know he's having nightmares, he doesn't try to do anything about it because he doesn't see anybody there. So, in my mind, he thinks this is just another nightmare and he's just going to wake up from all this and it's going to be fine. Well, then it doesn't. And then when Nancy goes and visits him in jail, that's the first time that we realize that Rod's having the exact same nightmares. And his death was set up even to look like a suicide, which you would buy if you're an accused murderer. Nobody thinks anything of it. So for me, that was the reason that I chose Rod, is that he was very misunderstood and, trying to play tough guy, but scared just as anybody else.
Grady. Schneider. Schneider's a different one. I wonder if anyone else out there agrees with you, because that one's a different one.
I'll tell you that Nightmare 2 is so tough because even though the body count is huge because of the pool scene, there's not a lot of relatable characters that we can choose from here. So I would be interested to hear everybody else's opinions as well. But I'm
Sure.
happy to support my choice.
Initially Grady's kind of a jerk. I mean, you see it in the beginning. And as it goes on, though, Grady and Jesse become friends.
Mhm.
And so that moment where Jesse goes to visit him, he's like, I feel like I'm going crazy here. All this stuff is happening to me. And all of a sudden, you see Freddy's taking over Jesse's body. And I think the extra layer to this is that, yes, it's Freddy that kills Grady, but using Jesse to do it. So it's that added layer of now he just killed his own friend. So to me, it's the most sympathetic because it's not just another kill by Freddy Krueger. It's a kill using someone else to do it to get to their friend. So that was
Yeah.
sad.
Growing up, I would agree with you 100%. And this is one of the few on my list that over the time that, between the first time I watched it now, my opinion has shifted. So I picked Schneider. First off, I think this man is criminally misunderstood. Okay, stick with me for a moment. This man is a public school teacher, which obviously means he's underappreciated and underpaid. But the other layer that we're not really thinking about here is a year before this, we had this incident with Freddie and the teenagers in the same area. We know that because Jesse moves into Nancy's house, and Glenn is referenced as a jock, which means most likely Schneider had a pretty good relationship with Glenn. He was probably a star athlete, had a good relationship there, so he's probably still trying to deal with that. If you notice, the very first time that Schneider gets involved, when Grady pulls Jesse's pants down and they get into a little squabble, he lets them go at it for a bit before stepping in. And then when he steps in, of course, he has to deal out punishment. But I mean, that's his job. His job is to separate them. He's not over the top about it. He steps in and says, assume the position. But then there's a point where Grady is talking about Schneider to Jesse, and he quotes him. I think he says something like, he goes to these queer S&M joints, and it's portrayed as a bad thing. Now, product of its time, obviously, but I think that alone gives you kind of the mindset of where Jesse and Grady think about Schneider. Is he some sort of weirdo, or whatever the case may be? But again, they're in the locker room and they said something about him having a stick up his ass. And Jesse says Schneider's always got a stick up his ass. Well, Schneider's standing there, so what's he got to do? He has to punish him again because you can't talk about people like that. But I think my biggest supporter of everything that I'm saying here is when we're talking about the bar scene. So Schneider catches Jesse into a bar. He's in the bar, he's about to drink. What does he do? Well, he gets him out of the bar, first and foremost, protects him, but he doesn't go to his parents or the police. He doesn't want him to get into more trouble, but he does want to make sure that he learns his lesson. So he has him run some laps and he's going to send him on his way. Hit the shower and then you can go home. Again, not over the top. He could have done so many bad things if he was a really bad person there. He could have potentially got Jesse in jail or in juvie or something like that. He didn't. He wanted to teach him a lesson and send him on his way. Some would consider that teacher of the year material. I'm just saying. To top it all off, his death scene is very memorable for all the wrong reasons. But to add insult to injury, the towel snaps. I'm always going to be sympathetic about the towel snaps. So that is why I have chosen Schneider, and I'm interested to hear everybody else's take.
Taryn. We got the
Okay,
same one this time.
we matched. I want to hear your justification. I'm sure it's quite similar.
All right. So I feel like with Taryn, she's basically everyone's favorite, I think. I mean, when I talk to other people, it's always Taryn because she's beautiful and bad, you know.
Hmm.
But the thing is she's a recovering drug addict and she's going through some things. And so in real life, she's kind of to herself and very withdrawn. But when she's in her dream, she's confident and just outgoing and like the polar opposite of that waking life. So to see her finally go toe to toe with Freddie and to see it just end so quickly broke my heart. It really did. And I know other people have thought the dude that had that was walking, who was turned into a puppet, I think a lot of people find that to be a sympathetic death. But with Taryn, I guess it's one of those things where you kind of dig a little deeper into your characters. And I just felt for her. I was like, damn it, I didn't want her to die. She was kind of my favorite one. So that's short and sweet for me. I felt like she was kind of coming out of her shell a little bit when she was in her dreams. And just to see her not really get that long of screen time with Freddie, I was like, it would have been so cool to see her go on to the next one the way we saw Lisa Wilcox as Alice go from 4 to 5. It just would have been so cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree
Anyway,
more. Taryn, of course, was my pick, but I'll tell you my honorable mention was Philip, played by Bradley Gregg. I think the reason that he is my second choice to that, one, he didn't get a lot of screen time, but two, I feel like there were layers to that as well because he was here because he sleepwalks, not because of a drug problem, not because of a suicide attempt, not because, all of these other things that all of these other kids have. This kid sleepwalks, so they put him in a mental institution. With Taryn, you hit the nail on the head in many ways. In reality, it's almost like she has no confidence. She lets her past kind of live under a cloud. She's not herself, but then she goes into a dream and she can kind of sprout out. But I'll go a little bit deeper. The scene that she's playing Dungeons and Dragons with Joey and Will, even though clearly she doesn't want to be there, they want her there. So she's trying to be a nice person and entertain them a little bit. The scene I'll point most to though is the scene with Lorenzo where she's getting out of the shower and Lorenzo is offering her drugs, with no consequence. You can get away free and clear. She stands pat, says, "No, that's ancient history. I'm not that person anymore." She's in her dream sequence with Freddie and she's scared for a split second, but then immediately takes control and kind of goes on the offensive. And that's one of the things with part three that I really wish we could have saw is the series of nightmares that they had and not just the one and done. So I would like to see the previous ones where they were able to get away. Obviously, screen time wouldn't allow that. Run times get really long and budgets and things like that. But even in the fight with Freddy, he gets her in the leg, cuts her leg wide open. She doesn't even flinch. She just keeps going for it. And at the end, Freddy only defeats her because of her own fears, not because she's scared of Freddy. So that's why Taryn was my choice.
that was a cool glove too.
Very cool.
Let's get
Very cool.
high.
Yeah.
My backup for that, I forgot to mention, was Nancy. So I struggled with that a little bit because Nancy having fallen for that trick in the third one, I did feel for her. And you know what? I think I feel for her because personally, I lost my dad. So I can see where she would just be like wanting to have that affection from her dad, like missing her
Hmm.
dad and just losing sight of what is going on around her and what really could be happening.
Really, what you got to look at is the difference in her relationship with her dad between one and three. She's a daddy's girl in one. In number three, they have no relationship. He's, an alcoholic by now, lost his job. He's a security guard now. He has almost no relationship with her at all. And so I think that's why she kind of let her guard down for that moment. But yeah,
Yeah.
very sad.
Rick. Rick. Hello,
Yeah.
Rick.
100%. I'm interested to hear your honorable mention here and reasoning, but I think you and I picking Rick, I can see exactly why, but let's do it.
I had forgotten until I just recently watched this how funny and how cool of a personality he actually had. So I wonder how many people out there find him to be their favorite character of Nightmare on Elm Street 4. He became mine, I think. I mean, outside of Alice, he became mine because he just seemed like the guy that everyone wants to be friends with in high school. even after his girlfriend was killed, he was still kind of trying to get through and sort of be there for his sister. And someone said something about her stories or something like that. And he said, I don't know if it's a story. It's kind of starting to have some basis to these dreams here.
Yeah.
He said, we're dropping like flies. I kind of thought that he was taken out unfairly because we didn't see that either. Okay, the gloves on the floor and he kicked the crap out of, this invisible Freddy. And you're thinking, oh, maybe he's actually going to get away. A lot of times when I pick a sympathetic death, I guess it's for how it makes others feel, how it impacts,
Mhm.
all the people around. And this was one of those. I feel like his death was impactful. It wasn't just a throwaway death like you see in slasher movies.
Yeah, great supporting argument there. I'll tell you mine. One, he's dating Kristen, right? We know this, which means he's taking on all that baggage and he's managing it. She's been through some trauma and potentially still has some mental health issues because she's telling, for him, they're just stories. They're wildly unbelievable, but he's letting her go with it and trying not to judge too much. But also, we're noticing, he's dealing with an alcoholic father who wants nothing to do with him whatsoever. And he's trying to hold it together for his sister and try to break his sister out of her shell. She also has some sort of trauma or something going on with her. We can't quite figure it out, but she's not quite right. She's daydreaming all the time to escape reality. But when you think about it, he loses his girlfriend. And first of all, losing Tuesday night is like devastating to any man on this planet. So I wouldn't even be able to go on. But my man not only managed to go on, but didn't even focus on his own grieving, but again turned his support to his sister. He wanted to support his sister's loss and not focus on his own loss. So to me, that's a big one. And this is evident in, his death scene. He falls asleep because he had mentioned he was up all night with Alice because Alice was taking it a little rough. And so, obviously we don't have a good death scene for Rick, which is a travesty to me because Rick is not only my favorite character of Dream Master, but of the entire franchise. Andres does such a great job with this, and as you say, so cool and relatable, but like you want to be his friend and like everybody wants to look up to him. Just all around best character in the franchise, in my opinion. And Freddy, I realized that his death scene went the way it did because of budgets and writers' strikes and things like that. But if you think about it in terms of, the Nightmare on Elm Street world, I choose to see it as Freddy even refused to face him because he was afraid of him. And so he hid, and that's how he got to Rick because he knew Rick would stand up to him, on behalf of his sister and everybody else. So that's the way I choose to remember it. My backup, I should say, is Sheila because she didn't deserve that. Come on. She's there helping everybody out. She's the nicest person. She had nothing to do with anything. And then all of a sudden, Alice falls asleep and we lose Sheila as a result. So that's my backup.
Sheila was my backup as well. And the only reason why she didn't move up higher on that was because we didn't get a lot of time with her.
Yeah,
You know,
same.
it was kind of sad the way she went out because, like you said, she was always helping someone else. Debbie had the problem with the bugs, and so she creates this cool contraption that helps with
Mhm.
keeping bugs away. I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. This is my favorite of the sequels. I can't even believe I'm saying that because because 3 was my favorite for the longest time. But then again, some of these movies, some of the sequels I hadn't seen until I was an adult. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to see them. It's just they came out at a time where what I saw kind of depended on the adults around me. So I saw what they rented or what they had on the TV. And Nightmare on Elm Street sequels just weren't always it.
Mhm.
So, but Halloween was, which is
Yeah.
a whole nother conversation. But yeah, so all right, you ready for three, two, one?
Yeah, let's
We'll
do it.
go three, two, one. Dan. Mark.
Mhm.
Okay.
I watched this for the first time as a kid and I identified with Mark. His personality, chasing the girl he can never have, and I kind of fell into him. He was into comic books. I wasn't necessarily into comic books, but I appreciated the art that he was doing. Like it was very, very cool. But again, he was in love with Greta, and it's one of those hopeless. He knows it's never going to happen, but he's there doing his thing. And before he even get a chance to kind of shoot his shot there, Greta dies. Okay, which puts him just immediately into grief mode. But he is of the group, he's the first to believe Alice because after Greta is gone, he opens his mind to possibilities of, okay, this was way too much of a freak accident to just be, kind of a coincidental thing. And then once he gets pulled into what we find out to be Jacob's dream, he then, coming out of that, and he's got the cuts on his hands and everything, he goes and does his research and he tries to go team Alice and try to convince Yvonne and try to figure what's out. But I think to me, a scene that stands out with Mark is, he says something to the effect of, did you ever think about not having the baby? No baby equals no baby's dreams. And Alice says that's not a possibility. And he doesn't even dispute it. He says, okay, then we'll find another way. Like he just moves right on, which gives you like everything you need to know about his character because he knows his life is in danger because of this baby's dreams, but he's not pushing on this subject with Alice. He says, okay, I respect that. I'm going to move on. And then even in his epic death scene, he's getting bullied around by Freddy, but then when Freddy brings Greta into it and kind of, rubs salt into that wound, he changes and starts going toe to toe with him. Doesn't work out for him, but he at least tries to stand up and defend Greta's honor. So that's why I picked Mark.
One thing I will say about Greta is I really liked her personality, and I was genuinely bummed when she went because on the day of their graduation, when she says, I gotta go gnash my teeth for the paparazzi, I'm like, oh, I like her personality.
Yeah.
I I would have loved to have seen her go a little bit further. But yeah, with Dan, I kind of felt like he was the jock that you expected to be kind of a jerk, and he never was. The reason why I felt for his character is because of how it impacted, again, how it impacted Alice, because she's lost so many people already. And now at this point, she doesn't know she's pregnant, but yeah,
Hmm.
she's pregnant. That's the father of her child, and he's gone.
Hmm.
And she was leaning on him, for support in her life. The way he died was just freaking awful. I mean, awesome effects.
Very cool.
I mean, in that on that motorcycle scene, but just sad because you saw her reaction to it too. And that's what I have to say, like about 4 and 5, and I think people would agree with me on this. Lisa Wilcox acting as Alice, you actually felt for her. Like you could see her emotions, or even,
Hmm.
I mean, even going back to the graduation day where her friend is saying, "Oh, you're not sleeping well. Well, maybe you should put a lock on your window so Dan can't get in at night." She was like, "Oh, the Dan parts were nice," and you believed
Right.
her.
Yeah.
Like her acting, you believed her. And so, with the way her feelings were and how basically her emotions were on her sleeve, you saw just how much that impacted her to lose yet another person in her life.
Dan would be my backup, and for the reasons you mentioned, but also this is the person that she shared this traumatic event with and made it out on the other side. And so, they have this bond that goes beyond their relationship at this point. This is a real thing that happened. And, fortunately for Alice, her dad finally comes back around and steps up and really seems very supportive. And so it kind of cushions the blow a little bit for Dan not being there.
For Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, this is kind of a fun movie, but it has so many dark undertones to it that
Yeah.
I think it just gets lost in the shuffle because people remember it as being silly. But the deaths in this and the dreams in this were almost hard to watch.
Yeah.
So,
They were very developed.
yeah. All right. So you ready to reveal?
Let's go.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Carlos. Yep, Carlos.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In my mind, that's the only, there are some that hit harder than others, but he's got to be at the top of the list.
I actually felt really sorry and sad for him in this. Which, there's a lot of characters that you just don't really care about, whatever, it's a slasher. But with Carlos, it showed in his dreams it was manipulated so much that Freddie knew that his fear was his mother, since his mother used to abuse him with this Q-tip,
Mhm.
to discipline him. She would stick the Q-tip in too far. And oh gosh, so he really Freddy Krueger, this is one of the deaths that probably stands out to me the most from the franchise because he creates this was it like a contraption on his ear that
Yeah.
turned the volume up so high so
Hmm.
that he could literally hear a pin drop. And I mean, at one point, how he drops the pins and he's like, oh. But anything that's dealing with like eyeballs or ears, and it just has layers to it because he's
Hmm.
already been abused. He's obviously one of the kids that was teenagers that was at this home or whatever. So he's there for a reason. And then to have Freddie basically pick at those memories and turn himself into the mother in this dream where she has this big, huge Q-tip and sticking it through one ear. Now, oh God,
Mm.
like just thinking about it, just talking about it
Yeah.
now gets me. But I felt so bad for him because his death wasn't just a quick slashed, oh, he got gutted and now he's dead. No, like that went on for a while. My backup was actually Loretta Kruger because she's so innocent. She didn't do anything.
Yeah.
All she did was she stumbled upon some things down in the basement that good old Robert was working as Robert Englund, um,
Yeah.
aka Freddie.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he choked the crap out of her in the backyard right in front of her daughter. So that
Right
was
there.
that was a sympathetic death for me as well as a backup. So
Yeah, it's a great explanation. It's very, very similar to mine. Again, we learn at the very beginning of the movie when he's holding the punching bag and Spencer says something like, stand up for yourself, and he points to his handicap and he says, I stopped doing that when it became hazardous to my health. We learn very, very quickly he's been abused and he lost his hearing in his right ear as a result. We find out later on that he's anti-drugs because he calls Spencer a stupid stoner, I think is what he calls him. He's terrified of his mother, like his nightmare is his mother. That alone gives you sympathy. But his death scene, intense. He takes away his hearing to begin with. Freddy does. He begs for it back and then he gets it back. But as you said, he kind of amplifies it to an unheard of level. And then he just toys with him. And this is where, the scene with Carlos is what I would have loved to have seen with the others in their previous dreams across the franchise of Freddy kind of toying with them a little bit and not moving in for the kill immediately. He drops the pin and Carlos dives and he catches it and he's got this relief. And then of course, what does Freddy do? He has a handful of pins, so he drops all of them and that just wreaks havoc. Then you have the chalkboard scene, which I cannot stand. I can't do it. I just can't do it.
do you mute the TV?
Oh, I just mute it altogether. I can't do it. But, he just goes on and on and on and tortures this poor kid until, finally his head explodes. But the other thing for me is even after he dies, you see him come back in sort of Spencer's tripped out thing where he's seeing people in the TV. He kind of busts through. Spencer, get out, wake up, don't fall asleep. So he's even trying to save Spencer even after he's already dead. While his death is sad, that kill sequence is one of the best of the entire franchise, so I can't take that back. I did not have a backup for this one. This was a no-brainer for me.
This is not on par with what we're talking about, but that Spencer thing was funny. I
It was a
cracked up
it
on
was
that.
hilarious.
I did
But
not expect it to be so hilarious.
when he said you forgot the Power Glove, I lost it. As a Nintendo fan from when that came out, no, that was it for me.
That's why I say just a little quick clip to say if anyone out there has gotten only a few minutes into this one and buzzed it off, please watch it again because some parts are so funny. And I realize that you don't necessarily want Freddy to be that funny, but I don't know. I kind of look at it as like the Scream 3 of the franchise in some ways.
It
Like
pokes fun at
off the rails.
itself, right? It
Yeah,
it kind of looks at itself as a whole and doesn't take it too seriously. That's what I like.
yeah.
But it's a fun movie.
Julie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
Julie
no-brainer
too.
here. No-brainer. And I'll tell you, probably high in the running for most sympathetic death in the entire franchise. From the very first moment that we see Julie come in, it's extremely apparent that her and Dylan have this unbreakable bond and that Heather trusts her with, with Dylan's life. Like full send right from the beginning. When we get to the part where Dylan's in the hospital and, Heather's already made it clear, don't sedate him and those kind of things. Julie sees that it's about to happen and grabs the nurse, like forcefully grabs her, like, no. And then, of course, the other nurse has, the other needle and sedates Dylan. But even from that point, Julie just punches that lady right in the face and then threatens the other one with a needle, gets her out of there. I don't know of any other babysitter that goes above and beyond the call of duty like that, but God love her, she was the best. What I will say is it's a very heartbreaking death scene because Dylan's watching it happen. It seems slow moving at the time, and it feels like it takes forever because it's just so brutal. And it's probably because of how sad it is. The scene where she's reaching to Dylan and Dylan's reaching back to her is just like the snapshot that breaks my heart every time. But being a sucker for the franchise, I love the throwback to the original Tina death scene. It was amazing.
Yeah, we have seen that Tina death scene reproduced twice now, basically with that and then with the remake. So the only thing I would add to that is that yeah, watching it, you're thinking this kid is going to be traumatized for life now. I mean, like he hasn't already seen enough already, and now he sees his babysitter get killed.
My backup would have been Chase, the dad, but the reason that he gets ruled out for me, I mean, it's very simple. He's working on this project. He knows he's working on another Freddy film. His wife is saying that she's having these nightmares. They're having these calls. Like all of these things are happening, and he's just like keeping this whole thing a secret. So I have no sympathy for him. Sorry. Sorry, Chase.
At first, I felt bad for him when he was the first name that came to my mind, but then I snapped out of it because I was like, wait a second here.
Yeah.
He acted like he didn't have any idea what her fears were about,
Hmm.
Forget Chase. This was like total carnage. Uh, but I'm gonna go ahead. Three, two, one, Mark. Oh, we have different ones. You
Yeah,
have
I want to hear
Charlie,
yours
Charlie
because I'll tell you,
Linderman.
Mark was my backup, but I want to hear
Was
your
was
reasoning.
he? Okay.
Yeah.
Mark was my only one, and I felt like so he had a lot of trauma from his brother's death. Again, here's another time where there's layers to the victim. It's not just a person in the field number two that was partying. He had some mental trauma from that and now was in an institution with another friend of his, and they both broke out and they're trying to warn people. And so he's trying to do this good thing. It's another death where you can see how it's affecting the people around him. Like his best friend is looking through the window when it happens, and he couldn't help him. It reminded me of that Nancy Glenn situation. It was so sad to me. It was
Yeah.
one of those that kind of stood out among all the carnage and mayhem that was just happening in the whole movie.
I agree with you there. That's a lot of those reasons are why he was my backup. One, he put himself on the line just so they could break out because he noticed that Will was really, really worried. So he went and he stole the keys and they got out. But really beyond that, we have the backstory and he has this trauma from his brother, but he knows that it wasn't a suicide. He knows about this whole other world. And without him kind of informing everybody else about the world, they wouldn't have a clue on how to beat him, how to beat Freddy, or how to even try to fight him. So that's why, for me, he was my backup. But at the same time, he spread the paranoia about Freddy, so it made it worse. So it was kind of a double-edged sword there. Linderman for me, this is a good kid. Doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs. He's just a straight shooting kid. You see him get bullied in the rave scene, but it's implied that it's normal behavior. It's a pattern of bullying. He has a crush on Lori, similar to the Mark Greta thing. It's not going to happen, but to the point where Kelly Rowland's character, just like kind of makes fun of him and kind of razzes him and things like that. And the great scene for him is really when he just tells her off and he just goes on this rant and just burns her. And if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. Puts her right in her place to the point where she's speechless. But really, the focal point of that scene for me is Laurie's face, Monica Kena's face in that, because she's like, oh, because he knows that, or she knows that he burned her pretty bad. But really, the sympathetic part to me is after he's injured, when the first big Freddy and Jason fight happens, he's very badly injured. He gets put up against a tree and he's just kind of resting, and Kia's trying to tend to him and make sure he's okay. And he's like, no, I'm fine. Go get help, knowing he's dying, right? We find out that, he's gushing blood everywhere. Now, technically, we'd never saw him die, but it's implied that he's dead. So that's why I picked Linderman.
I had forgotten how he went out. That is sad.
Yeah.
Okay, those are both really good ones. Now you have me feeling bad for this character that's made up.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark's character, and I think it's Brendan Fletcher is the actor's name. He is phenomenal in the entire movie. Like he is a standout performance in all of his scenes, and so I think that's what makes his death a little bit more impactful because you really feel like he's in this world. So not a bad pick.
Yeah,
Good pick.
thank you.
Yeah.
I love this movie. I know it catches hell from some of the fans because it's not Robert Englund, but I don't care. I feel like
Yeah.
it's one of the scariest ones, if not the scariest of the franchise.
Yeah.
Robert Englund has a lot of the cool quips and everything and makes it fun, like almost like an Art the Clown kind of thing.
Hmm.
But Jackie Earle Haley, hands down, he did an
He's
amazing job in this.
That's what I tell everybody. It's if you go in comparing it, that's your first mistake, right? This is a re
Absolutely.
I describe it as a reimagining. It is much, much darker. And even really when you talk about the origin story, it's not just the child murders. It really goes into, some other, worse topics, we'll just say. And again, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch. But Jackie Earle Haley was fantastic. He did more with that script than anybody else could have done. And he didn't go out and try to be Robert. And I think that's where, in my mind, he succeeded. He created his own interpretation, and I loved it. I don't understand the hate again, other than, people just wanting Robert to be there. As a standalone, it's a solid entry and it's very scary.
And the real tragedy is that we didn't get any more after that.
If the fans would have reacted better, we could have got a whole new franchise.
I would love to see that guy at Scarefest. I'm just putting that out there.
He's amazing. And yes, if we can get him at Scarefest, I wouldn't be mad. I'm just saying.
yeah. Yeah.
I
So
wouldn't
you
be
get,
mad about a whole 2010 reunion. I'm just saying.
oh, you got to meet him
Yeah.
at one of the, did he seem
Yeah.
cool?
Yeah, he was at a
Yeah.
show, and people go to him for other things because he was in Bad News Bears back in the 70s. He was
Right.
Kelly Lee. But I think a lot of people go for Watchmen, I think is what he's most known for. And so when I went and I saw him and I talked to him and I shared pretty much what I just said with you, he was very appreciative. And he is proud of his performance regardless of, what the reaction was. And I'm happy about that. He doesn't let it get to him. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm curious on this last one.
Yeah.
Three, two, one. Jesse. Ah, Dean. Okay. All right. So Jesse, this is an interesting one because you chose Rod for the first movie.
Yep.
I'm choosing Jesse partially for the same kind of reasons
Hmm.
because Jesse, he still loves Chris, who is basically the Tina of this remake, if you haven't seen it. Jesse loves her, and they've kind of broken up or something, and she's scared though. She keeps having these dreams. She actually saw Dean die in front of her, and which is pretty horrific, the way it all went down. And then, Jessie is trying to comfort her and she's like, "Oh, I want you to stay here." And it's that whole remake of what happened with
Hmm.
Rod and Tina. So he sees her get killed, this epic scene again where she just falls on the bed and of course he's got blood all over him and it's kind of like he's gotten framed by Freddy,
Yep.
in a manner of speaking. Jackie Earle Haley in that growly Freddy voice, he says, "Did you know that after the heart stops beating, the brain can function for well over 7 minutes? We got 6 more minutes to play." And you're just like, oh my God. He's already been gutted at that
Hmm.
point. What more can you do to this poor guy in the next 6 minutes?
And I
So,
think at that very moment is where the movie hits harder, and you kind of understand that this interpretation of Freddy doesn't stop at a kill. He wants to kill and continue to torture.
Oh yeah, it's gnarly.
If you have seen it, but you haven't seen it in a while, go watch it again with fresh eyes. And I'll tell you why. The very, very first time I saw it, I was let down. I saw it opening night and I was let down because again, you have this expectation and it's never going to meet that expectation, but it doesn't make it less than, it just makes it different. And so I watched it about a year later and I'm like, wait a minute, there's a little bit of something here that I missed the first time around because I was too busy comparing. Once you take those glasses off and you just start watching it as its own thing, it's great. I enjoy it very much.
All right, so you chose
I chose Dean, and here we go. Don't judge me. Big Twilight fan. So by the time Nightmare 2010 came out, Kellen Lutz is advertised. Kellen Lutz plays Emmett in the Twilight movies, right? And so by the time Nightmare 2010 had come out, there had already been two Twilight movies out, with a third one coming 2 months after Nightmare 2010's release. So to me, big star, and it was the Drew Barrymore effect. I'm going in and I'm thinking, okay, the movie is opening with him. He's going to be the central point of the whole movie. I can't wait to see what they do with this. And then in a matter of minutes, he's gone. But within the matter of minutes, we learn so much, and it really sets up the entire movie. We know that he's the first to have the nightmare. So there's nobody out there that's sympathizing or believing. We find out that he already went to therapy to try to figure this out, and the therapy is what actually triggered the nightmares. So we know he's having all these problems, but then therapy is what triggered the nightmares. He brings Chris in because Chris is apparently the person he trusts most in the world, and she's very dismissive of his concerns, saying that they're not real and just kind of casting him aside. And again, as we've seen other times in the franchise, his death was made to look like a suicide. But I think for me, it's very simple. Without Dean's death, everyone else is spared. Because if Dean doesn't start having these nightmares, yeah, all of these things happened in their past, but none of it is stirred up because he's sort of the catalyst for it all. So that's why I chose Dean. I will say I do feel for Jesse here, but the way he treated Nancy at the diner was a dick move. So he got knocked down a peg.
I always look at it with awe when someone has an opinion different than mine.
Yeah, same.
You, someone that says like one of the least favorites out there is their favorite in that world. I'm always curious then to know, oh, so why is it your favorite? And then when people start to explain, well, it's because of this, this, and this, I go, I must be missing something.
Yeah.
Now I have to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a sentimental thing, right? I grew up and I have this attachment. I watched it with my dad, whatever, whatever. I mean, th those you can't really you can't sympathize with those because if it didn't happen to you, you don't have that same experience. But yeah, a lot of times people will say things and I'll have to go back and watch it with a different set of eyes and just be in awe, like, wow, wait a minute. Here I am watching this for 30 years. I missed this whole subplot the whole time. And I think, Nightmare on Elm Street, unlike the other, the Halloweens and the Friday the 13th and everything, I think Nightmare on Elm Street did such a good job developing its characters that you care and their deaths are a little bit more impactful. Not to discredit the other franchises, but there were a lot of deaths in the others just for the sake of body count. So they didn't spend a lot of time on character development. And again, with the exception of Freddy's Revenge and the pool scene, Nightmare far and wide has a very low body count. So again, you must really feel for the characters for these to be impactful.
Maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, there were a couple people that posted up their ranking for one of the
Hmm.
franchises. And I was a little disappointed in some of what I saw in the comments, and I'll tell you why. When people say, oh, you must be trolling, or this is rage bait, using that kind of commentary on it, I'm thinking, this is a missed opportunity to ask someone, why is their ranking like that?
Yeah, exactly.
It could open up a conversation in that horror community, and you just missed that opportunity because you were too busy ridiculing someone because of how their ranking was. I say this to anyone who's in the horror community. If someone posts something online or says to you, that's my favorite in the franchise, and it's not your favorite, maybe just open up a dialogue asking why is it their favorite. I've asked that question. I asked that of Brandon when he said that Halloween 6 was one of his favorites, or Jason Takes Manhattan.
Hmm.
Why is it your favorite? Because now you're finding out oh, it's because of this scene,
Mhm.
or it's because of this character. And now you can go back and watch the movies from someone else's perspective, and maybe you'll still feel the same about it and think it's a junky movie. Or maybe you'll watch it and decide that it kind of went up in your own ranking.
Yeah, your opinion changes over time, and this is the case. I'll point out specifically Nightmare 2 and Nightmare 5. When they both came out, they were very poorly received. Both of them were for different reasons, obviously. Number two, everybody points back to the gay factor of the entire movie, and back in those days, it was frowned upon and it was hush hush, and you couldn't talk about those things. Things are very different now. That movie is celebrated now. They did an entire documentary, and I love that it gets its flowers all these years later. Nightmare 5 is starting to do the same thing now, right? Nightmare 5 has been hated since it came out. There's been a very small community of people, and here lately, I think over the past 5 years or so, it's starting to shoot up in people's lists. So, again, you can't cast judgment on something you haven't seen in forever. You saw it when it first came out and you didn't like it. Okay, go back and watch it again, right? And when you see other lists and people are saying it's their favorite or they have it ahead of one of your favorites, go find out why. Maybe you missed something the first time around. Maybe your life has changed and your perspective has changed. I don't know, but I encourage you, go watch it again.
I feel that YouTube creators are breathing new life into some movies that the younger generation just hasn't even touched. And maybe they're
Yeah.
out there watching YouTube and land on one of our videos where we're just giving high praise to something like Nightmare on Elm Street 5
Hmm.
that they weren't even born then, maybe. And now they see clips of it and see how gothic it is and how
Hmm.
cool the sets were. And maybe now they're drawn into watching it too. I think that's incredibly cool that
Yeah.
I'm not monetized, you're not monetized, but we're having fun with these channels, having these conversations about movies that we grew up on.
Absolutely.
So, but thank you for taking the time to chat about this.
Thank you for having me. This is a great conversation. I'm always up for a nightmare debate. Always in good spirits, of course, but it's as I said at the beginning, Nightmare on Elm Street's always going to be top of my list, and there's not a close second. So any topic about any of the franchise, I'm in for. So I appreciate the invite.
I'll be curious to see what interviews you have coming down the pipe for both Nightmare on Elm Street and non-Nightmare on Elm Street because you have some of those too.
Hmm.
So go check out Josh's channel. End and M podcast stands for Nightmares and Memories.